Now then, it is a new year, so therefore rail fares duly rose. In fact, they did so today. Some by much more than others. An annual Banbury to London ticket increases by £284. A return ticket between Birmingham and London rises by £2.50. So the average works out about 4.2%. It won't help rail passengers to know that they are paying the highest fares in Europe, if they didn't already. Not that the situation is likely to change anytime soon. Fatima Manji reports.
It's almost become tradition. Welcome in the new year and with it higher rail fares. Hardly music to the ears of passengers. The drumming may have been a tad annoying for those heading to work this morning, but the point was loud and clear. The rail fares are ripping us off.
It is the daily commuters that are being hit the hardest. Here at Ashford in Kent, the annual fare has gone up by £2,000 over 10 years. Unsurprisingly, people here aren't very happy.
Our wages don't go up. It's getting more and more expensive to go to work. So
it seems like another way that ordinary people are bearing the cost of government spending cuts.
One of the things the government says is that if the train fares don't go up, the taxpayer would have to pick up the bill.
Well, yes, so it should be, but at the top end. You know, I think too much emphasis is being placed on your average working person.
So just who is to blame? The train companies are quick to say it's the fault of the government, and today's rise isn't about profit.
It's important to recognise that it's the government, not train companies, that decides how much season tickets on average should go up each year. The question here is who pays for the railways, either the passenger or the taxpayer. This government is trying to reduce the contribution from taxpayers, and that means passengers have to pay more.
Many of those passengers feel they don't have a choice. They have to get to work, and usually at peak times. The government says it may seem unfair, but someone's got to pay.
well, we're very sympathy. We know that budgets are tight at the moment, but we have to invest in the future. People also tell us, passengers, that they want to make sure trains have got enough seats. They want to make sure the modern rolling stock is used, not old clapped out stuff. They want to ensure that the trains run on time. All those things require big investment.
And yet it also seems like a big, uniquely British problem. This morning I paid £35.50 for a ticket from London to Ashford in Kent, which is 60 miles away. So how far could I travel in other European countries for the same amount of money? Well, from Berlin I could travel 122 miles, from Paris 127 miles, and from Rome I could have travelled for 209 miles. So how do the Europeans do it? Well, in Britain, 90% of the passenger rail system is privately owned. Contrast that to Germany, for instance, where it's the opposite. 90% is publicly owned. But passenger groups aren't demanding a return to nationalisation.
We've never said as passengers the state should pay for it all. We just think it's getting the right balance. The trick is getting costs under control, becoming a more efficient railway so they can do what they're doing now for less, and we can take away the pressure on these ever-increasing fare rises.
And yet we can almost certainly say come January 2014, it'll be Groundhog Day. Rising fares, people protesting. Looks like I'd better buy my rail ticket in advance.
And I'm joined now in the studio by Tom Smith, who is chairman of the Association of Train Operating Companies. Well, Tom Smith, you would say, I assume, don't blame your train company tonight when you go home. It's nothing to do with them, it's just the government.
Well, the policy of above inflation increases in regulated tickets, of which much the most significant component is annual season tickets, is government policy, and it was policy of the previous government and has been for 10 years. And it's part of a move by those governments to shift the balance of meeting the cost of railways from the taxpayer to the passenger, the people who actually use them.
Well, that's right. I mean, that's the philosophical point. Have we got that right in this country? The Germans don't believe that, the Italians don't, the Spanish don't, the French don't. They say, no, no, no. Railway's not just a private service. It's part of the fabric. We need it. It's a public service. You've got to share the burden with the taxpayer more than we do in this country.
Well, it is a shared burden. The taxpayer does contribute.
Yes, but
the railway is a public service, and it is run as a public service. The point, I think, where you need to realise the difference between this country and those continental countries is the growth we have seen in demand for rail travel, which means that there is a need to increase capacity, which means there's a need for investment. Railways are a very capital-intensive industry wherever they are operated. and that needs to be sustained by government support, by public investment, which the government is doing, and the previous government was also doing. And in turn, their confidence in that is going to be and is enhanced by the ability of the industry to raise revenue from passengers.
Then if that's true, perhaps Network Rail, who take already, if I have it right, 48 pence in every pound on your rail fare, should take even more, and we rebalance it that way, rather than increasing the actual top price of the fare.
I'm not quite sure I understand the question.
Half the money goes to Network Rail in every pound, in every fare you pay. Surely you give Network Rail more, even more of the cake, if you like.
Well, I think the big challenge for Network Rail, as a major part of the rail industry, is actually to become more efficient and bring its costs down, and it is working in that direction. So I think to do what you suggest would be quite wrong at the moment.
The wider frame, a lot of people commenting on this today, to me, certainly saying it's a dog's breakfast. Privatisation has not worked. You need a much simpler, perhaps less competitive, in inverted commas, network. That's how you get something that's much more efficient, therefore cheaper.
Well, I don't agree with that. I think privatisation has worked. Since 1996, 97, when franchises were first let to the private sector, we've seen extraordinary growth in patronage, in passenger numbers, year on year, through a number of recessionary periods, in sharp contrast to what we saw in the 15 years leading up to that transition point, when British Rail was running the railways in a state of perpetual steady decline. We have turned around the railways, and they are better for it. The rolling stock is newer, stations are better, there are more journey opportunities, there are more cheaper fares. Today is all about fares.
And there are lots more expensive fares.
No, there are far more cheap fares than the headline expensive fares.
Tom Smith, I have to leave it there. Thanks very much indeed.